The other day, a man I love told me about a men's group meeting that he had gone to for the first time. It was a Bly meeting. That's what he said. Named after the great American poet Robert Bly, who is also renowned for his work on men's psychological and spiritual wholeness. My friend said that there were 4 rounds to the group session. Each part was meant to call forth a certain kind of deep, positive, masculine energy out of the participants. Round 1 was the lover round. Lover energy is about sensuality, but more than that. It is about what gets you excited. It is about what makes you passionate. Each man was asked to share how they were feeling lately, what was triggering emotion and passion in them. This led to round 2, the warrior round. Warrior energy is about strength and resolve tied to a higher cause. So each man was asked to name a place in his life where he was falling short, where he was out of integrity and needed to come clean and get back on track. This was also a time to ask for help, to ask another man to be in an accountability relationship with him, check in on him to see how he is doing, to offer encouragement. Then came round 3, the magician round. Magician energy is about creative imagination and then dedication to a craft that enables a man to take what he imagines and make it real. And accordingly, each man might be asked to share something that he was feeling curious about lately and wanted to explore in more depth. Other times, the men might use this round to practice a nonviolent communication skill or some other kind of skill. Finally, round 4, the king round. King energy is aliveness in the moment. It is groundedness in the moment. It is what structures the space, holds the space. It's what protects and defends. It is what blesses. The Bly group concluded in this way, with every man offering a blessing to the others. I was completely moved to hear that my friend had had this experience, or that such a group like this even existed. I was blown away. It also tweaked a vague memory I had about a book with a title, King, Warrior, Magician, Lover, Rediscovering the Archetypes of the Mature Masculine by Robert Moore and Douglas Gillette, who both draw from the Jungian tradition of modern psychology. I got the book, and there I read about the crisis of masculine identity we face today. A crisis in which men can't seem to get themselves together. There is fragmentation. There are divergent inner impulses that clash and result in toxic behaviors. It can be said, the book points out, that perhaps life's most fundamental dynamic is the attempt to move from a lower form of experience and consciousness to a higher or perhaps a deeper level of consciousness. To go from a diffuse identity to a more consolidated and structured identity. The crisis of masculinity is precisely about this, a blockage of this dynamic. Boys nurtured into forms of masculinity that are skewed and stunted and toxic. Boys not able to move from lower to higher because no one shows them the way to transform boy energies into healthy and life-giving man energies. That is what I want to talk about today. The journey a man must take to get to a higher level of masculinity so that he is giving life rather than taking it. And I want to do this by retelling a beloved story, a story most of us return to again and again at Christmas, the story of George Bailey in that beautiful movie, It's a Wonderful Life. I promise you we lose so much if we insist on seeing this movie as belonging only to one season of the year. So begin when George is in his teenage years. Among the 4 archetypes of the deep masculine, lover energy usually develops first. So George, as a teenager, fantasized about being a world traveler, going to Tahiti, sailing the Emerald Sea, exploring all these exotic locations and more, far away from Bedford Falls, boring town of his birth, opposite of exciting. As he grows older, his hope only grows more ambitious. In the movie, when he's 21, we see him buying luggage for his trip to Europe. He's got his life all figured out. First, he's going to go to Europe, and then he's going to college, and then he's going to build things. Skyscrapers, hundreds of feet high, bridges, a mile long. He's going to be a millionaire. Today, a billionaire. It's around this time that his father asks him a question that channels pure king energy. Would George be interested in returning home after college to run the family business, the Bailey Brothers Building and Loan Company? Now, hearing this, George goes quiet. Right before, he was deep in his lover energy. He was laughing and he was joking raucously with everybody in the house. But when his father asked him this question point blank, and lover came face to face with king, George got real quiet. Said, I couldn't face being cooped up for the rest of my life in a stuffy little office. I want to do something big. I want to do something important with my life. Now, men, I want you to think back to a time when we were like George and totally caught up in lover energy and lover priorities. But then you came face to face with the king, and king priorities felt boring and unimportant. On the other hand, for some men, we grew up having to express king energy far too early in our lives. So what happened for us is that the lover energy felt unworthy to us, ridiculous, a waste of precious time. Lover and king both make their claim upon a man, and the claims can clash and turn toxic. Back to the story. George is caught up in his lover fantasy of skyscrapers and bridges, miles long and lots of money. And I'll tell you what, this is aided and abetted by middle-class values. As a member of the middle class, George has naturally been brought up believing that people are free to control their own destinies. No limits. Just do it. Like Nike says, right? Just do it. The only person stopping you from climbing the success ladder, who is that? That is you. That is you doing that. This is what adds fuel to the fire of George's inner lover. This forms the core of his youth. But you know, sometimes you just can't do it, right? Sometimes you can't. Sometimes there are limits, and learning how to live within limits vitally is what kings do. And now George is going to learn this the hard way. His father dies, and he must give up his trip to Europe so he can settle his father's business affairs. He does it, and then, just as he is handing off important papers to the Building and Loans Board of Trustees, moments before he is out the door on the way to college, moments before his inner lover is about to burst forth, woo! Moments before, the other shoe drops. His father's arch enemy, Scrooge-like, Henry F. Potter. Y'all look at me like that. No, really, seriously, just... Yeah. He makes a motion that the building and loan ought to dissolve. Potter, who is wealthy beyond measure and could easily afford to give, asks, are we running a business or a charity ward? Arr. Arr. Hearing this, something snaps in George. He finds himself saying to Potter, you are right when you say that my father was no businessman. I know that. But he did help a few people get out of your slums, Mr. Potter. And what's wrong with that? Doesn't it make them better citizens? Doesn't it make them better customers? Just remember this, Mr. Potter, that this rabble you're talking about, well, they do most of the living and dying in this community. Well, is it just so much to allow them to work and pay and live and die in a couple of decent rooms and a bath? Anyway, my father didn't think so. People were human beings to him, but to you, a warped, frustrated old man, they are cattle. Well, in my book, he died a much richer man than you'll ever be. Inspired by this speech, the Building and Loan Board rejects the motion to dissolve, but only if George takes over his father's job as leader. And he does. And in this way, his inner king steps forward decisively. Decisively, but at the cost of wounding the inner lover. From this point forward, the inner lover becomes a magnet for regrets and resentments. The inner lover becomes a zone of rumination over all the lost opportunities of youth to pursue impassioned dreams. How many of you know this magnet for regrets and resentments that I am talking about? How many of you know that magnet? Yeah. George finds himself where he thought he would never be, working in his dad's stuffy office, stuck in Bedford Falls. He gets to continue his father's work of economic justice in this community that desperately needs him, and this is beautiful king energy, and he gets it. But still, his heart is at war with itself. Regret upon regret piles up. He's just a mess of contradictions. He marries a beautiful, caring wife. He has wonderful children. He is loved and respected throughout Bedford Falls, but all the wild, wonderful lover, energy, and humor of his youth is drained away. He grows cynical. He complains. I just want to do what I want to do. And no one listens. The bounce in his soul is gone. And it's like this with so many men today. The adversity of conflicted selves, heavy with regret, thinking and feeling that they are failures even as they are doing great work in this world. In fact, I would suggest that a lack of bounce in a man's life, the presence of inner conflict that saps away his vitality and makes him feel like he's only skimming the surface of his days, this is a symptom of the sort of thing that Robert Moore and Douglas Gillette talk about in their book when they talk about life's most fundamental dynamic, the attempt to move from a lower form of experience and consciousness to a higher or deeper level of consciousness. This is what's trying to happen in George Bailey. He is trying to get to a higher level, but he doesn't know that, and he does not know how. He is flailing about, and he sees it as evidence of wrongness, as opposed to evidence that life has a higher plan for him and is pushing him hard to get there. George is not alone in this. I am his brother in this. And maybe you are too. And the problems just escalate. Absent-minded Uncle Billy, right? Misplaces the $8,000 which was supposed to have been deposited in the building and loan funds. George faces bankruptcy, scandal, prison. In complete desperation, he sees no alternative but to turn to his enemy, Henry F. Potter, to do something that is utterly humiliating, to ask for help, ask for a loan. And Potter, who sits in the catbird seat now, says to George, "Look at you. You used to be so cocky. You were going to go out there, conquer the world. You once called me a warped, frustrated old man. What are you but a warped, frustrated young man, a miserable little clerk, crawling in here on your hands and knees, begging for help. You're better off dead." It is horrible. This movie may be called It's a Wonderful Life, but when it gets down to this part, I am watching through my fingers. Like it's not a Christmas movie, but a horror movie. Texas Chainsaw Massacre. The Exorcist. Especially when the scene shifts to him going home, and basically he terrorizes his wife, looks at her with eyes of flint, and terrorizes his children. This is a very, very good man who is behaving very badly. George eventually wanders out onto a bridge near Bedford Falls. It's night, snow falls in sticky flakes. George's face screwed up in pain. Potter's words ringing in his mind, "You're worth more dead than alive." Below him, raging torrent of a river. He looks down at that dark river. He is thinking very dark thoughts. Please hear me now. For a man to get to a higher level in his masculinity, something has to die. Moore and Gillette are explicit about this. Death, symbolic, psychological, or spiritual, is always a vital part of any initiation ritual. In psychological terms, the boy ego must die. The old ways of being and doing and thinking and feeling must ritually die before the new man can emerge. George Bailey is on that bridge, and he is thinking about dying, and there's a sense in which this is absolutely appropriate for him to be doing, because deep down he knows his life is not working anymore. He knows it. He never phrases it in terms of an internal clash between king and lover energies, or I will add, in terms of an insufficient presence of warrior and magician energies, but that doesn't matter. Instinctively, he knows things are fundamentally broken for him. But the absolute tragedy is that he is about to make a major mistake. If he throws himself off that bridge, he extinguishes himself. He offs himself. But life, the fundamental dynamic of life, wants him to keep living. It's just that it wants him to keep living at a higher level. The brokenness made whole. The reason why all people need to add the word initiation to their vocabulary is that it helps people harness the death instinct to serve the larger cause of life. It prevents people from mistaking a desire to be shattered in their ego with a desire to commit suicide. I still grieve Robin Williams. I grieve Anthony Bourdain. So many others to grieve. Life wanted something larger from them, and no one was there to show them the better way. I am thankful that It's a Wonderful Life throws us a curveball on this score. There he is, George Bailey, a man who has lost the bounce in his soul, and it is so flat it can't cope with the loss of $8,000. He just can't take it anymore. He finds himself alone, beaten, standing on a snowy bridge in that night, raging river below. Suicide seems the only way, and then splash! Someone else takes a dive, and suddenly instinct takes over in George. Takes him 2 seconds flat to grasp the situation, and he jumps right in to save that person who is drowning. He risks his life to save another. This is warrior energy. To do the hard thing in service to love and justice. It is incredible. Adversity has broken George down almost completely, and yet in the midst of direst weakness, he discovers that strength still remains, and so can we. You know, we can so often say to ourselves, as we contemplate horrible possibilities, if such and such happened, I could never survive it. Or if such and so happened, I wouldn't know what to do. And yet when the worst happens, when we go numb with shock, we discover persistence within. simply to take things one step at a time, one moment at a time. Events rush and swirl past us. The broken pieces of life overwhelm us. But for a time, we let things be. It is enough just to keep moving, and somehow we do. One step, one foot after the other. This is the warrior. This is the confidence in ourselves that starts to grow when we learn that whatever else the future may bring, we have stood in the fire before, we can stand in the fire again. We are stronger than we know. But now, what about the magician? Where's that in George's story? Comes into play with the person George saved from drowning. None other than Clarence Oddbody. Clarence Oddbody. Angel second class. He's an angel. He comes down to earth to give George a great gift. Direct experience of what Bedford Falls would have become had he never been born. Magician energy is imagination in a big way. It is getting up on the balcony and seeing how all the pieces come together. It is walking away from the daily clamor so you can refocus your imagination and see straight again. It is what the poet Rainer Maria Rilke was writing about when he said, sometimes a man stands up during supper and walks outdoors and keeps on walking because of a church that stands somewhere in the east. And his children, they say blessings on him as if he were dead. And another man who remains inside his house stays there. Inside the dishes, stays inside the glasses, so that his children have to go out far into the world toward that same church which he forgot. Clarence Oddbody, angel second class, releases George from staying stuck in his own house, stuck inside the dishes, stuck inside the glasses. Clarence Oddbody, angel second class, sends him way out there on a vision quest. And it's terrible. Without George Bailey, Bedford Falls, hellish place. It blows his mind, opens his mind up. He comes to know he was living a wonderful life already. Everything he honestly and truly needed for happiness, he already had, even with all the bad luck circumstances that seemed time and again to prevent him from pursuing his youthful hopes, even though he never became that world traveler. He never went to college. He never built that skyscraper hundreds of feet high, the bridges a mile long. Even so, the worth of his life was diminished not one whit. Worthy dreams can happen even in a stuffy small office in boring Bedford Falls, a hero journey right there in the everyday. The only thing missing is him getting his inner life right. His inner masculine energies learning to dance together. And the vision of Bedford Falls without him does the trick. He cries out, Clarence, Clarence, help me. Get me back, get me back. I don't care what happens to me. Get me back to my wife and kids. Help me, Clarence, please, please. I want to live again. I want to live again. I want to live again. This is pure warrior energy because as far as he knows, he is still out $8,000. Coming back to life means facing bankruptcy, scandal, prison. But he will move heaven and earth to achieve the life that he has always wanted, which is the life he's always lived. And he's just realizing that right now. He rushes home. Bank examiners are there to question him. The police are there, ready to take him in. All he wants to see is Mary. Where's Mary? Where is Mary? There she is. And he looks at her in a way that leaves no doubt in anybody's mind. He is madly in love. His inner lover is healed. His inner lover is back. And that's the journey of his life, from innocence to woundedness, but not getting stuck there, the whole phoenix process. Instead, from ashes to new life. So now, men, what about your journey? What masculine archetype aches within you because its dreams have been denied? What does the clash in your soul look like? Are you a good man behaving badly? How? Are you hungering for initiation and a kind of death that can allow you to find a better way to live? How might your warrior energies help you to keep showing up no matter what? Where is the magician active in your life with a desire to help you see your world from a completely different perspective? Every man has deep depths, energies, wanting to be known, and the journey of a man's life is about expressing these primal energies in an integrated way. The solution to today's masculinity crisis, it is not less masculinity, but more. The solution is more. More of the lover, more of the king, more of the warrior, and more of the magician. All four coming fully to life within the man in unity and in peace. Amen.